Right, I'm Bob Roudebush. Why should you listen to me? Well, you probably shouldn't, first of all. But if you decide to, this is your excuse. I've been doing technology as it relates to sales for about 15 years, so I am a sales engineer for BlueLock, and I think I have a lot of experience I can share with you around this idea of application scalability in the cloud. So, we have all been shopping with our significant other or out with girlfriends at the fashion mall and probably have heard this question, I assume. It's probably not very germane to the discussion tonight. One that's probably more appropriate is this idea of, does this cloud make my app look fat? That's really what application scalability is all about, right? It's about how do you scale an application when you move it to the cloud. So, if you look at the left-hand side, this is a traditional IT infrastructure, right? We've got dials we can turn to the left or to the right that affect application scalability. One's hardware. As I turn my hardware up, I've got to turn my facility up. I've got to make sure I have operating systems in place, and then I have to make sure that my application can take advantage of that additional processing capacity. That's sort of the old world. How do we deal with application scalability in the new cloud world, right? And I'm going to suggest that if you're worried about the scalability of software as a service, that falls squarely in the someone else's problem department, right? If you're building an application or deploying an application, really the two tools that you have at your disposal is a choice between platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. And each one of those, I think, has benefits when it comes to application scalability. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So moving on up, scaling up is the traditional way we've thrown more compute power at application scalability. Infrastructure as a service offerings in the cloud computing arena are a great way to be able to do scale-up configurations for applications, right? Some things you need to think about. One, can you scale computing power up and, more importantly, down as needed, right? In the old world, I had to go buy hardware, I had to provision it, I had to rack it up, I had to have power, cooling, all that fun stuff. The idea that I can run my server in the cloud means that I can scale up, add more memory, add more processing capacity as I need it. But just as important, you need to find out, can I scale that back down? Right? Because especially if you're building an application that has peak or seasonal load associated with it, you want to be able to go back down and achieve those cost benefits. The second is that not all infrastructure as a service offerings are created equal, right? Some of them over-provision or, more importantly, don't guarantee compute capacity for your servers that you're running in the cloud. So you want to be able to say to that vendor, as you're doing your research, do you over-provision my environment, right? Or do I have a dedicated amount of compute capacity that's available to me at all times? And then, just because we're running servers in the cloud as IT professionals, we haven't lost our usefulness altogether, right? We still have to be intelligent about the technology decisions that we're making. It's just that now we're transferring those decisions to the cloud. So we have to understand the underlying software and hardware architecture that infrastructure as a service provider is using, because there are going to be limitations, right? In terms of storage I/O, whether I'm using iSCSI or Fibre Channel, scalability in terms of which hypervisor, for example, maybe I've chosen to deploy. And so those are some things to consider when you consider application scalability and scaling up in the cloud. What about scaling out, though, right? When you hear about cloud computing, the first thing you hear about is this idea that I can dynamically and organically scale up and down, and I can move things around and add capacity, right? That's probably not infrastructure as a service, to be quite honest, right? Scaling out is probably more appropriate for platforms as a service. So if you've heard of things like Azure, we've got a Microsoft person in the room, .NET Azure. If you're a Ruby on Rails developer, you maybe are familiar with things like Heroku or EngineYard, right? These are platforms as a service which allow you to embed the configuration of your application as code in that application, right? And then have the platform be intelligent enough to add capacity or take capacity away as you need it. The big drawback, of course, is that you have to re-engineer your application, which if you've made a huge investment already in terms of development is probably not a great idea, right? It's going to be a significant time and resources investment. But if you're starting new, is actually a great way to get scale in the cloud. So this is ideal for things like web-facing applications. You can scale out on the front end for application or web servers, and on the back end you can use the scale-up model to scale up access to things like MySQL or Microsoft SQL databases or Oracle or whatever database solution you may be using. So the net here is that scale up, you're going to use infrastructure as a service. Scale out, platform as a service is probably a better choice for you. So the exciting thing for me as I think about this, right, whether I'm considering scale up or scale out, being able to do that in the physical server on-premise world is something that was really cost prohibitive, that was expensive, was pretty much impractical, right? I'd have to buy additional hardware, I'd have to deal with the management headache of multiple machines. So you can, pick your favorite analyst. Gartner says by 2012, 80% of Fortune 1000 companies are going to leverage cloud in some way, shape, or form. My belief is that it probably won't be a one-size-fits-all solution, that it will be a mix and match of different technologies depending on the kind of application scale you need. So with that, thank you for your time this afternoon. I'll turn it, or this evening, I'll turn it back over to the next presenter.
Great, thank you very much.